Take 3.
I'm Michael,
I'm Melvin.
and we are doing our discussion and video over the civil rights era from 1930 up until the passage of the Civil Rights Amendment in 1960.
64.
Thank you very much. But first and foremost, prior to World War II, there was a disagreement about how you would come about the integrating or segregating African Americans in the United States.
Yeah.
Many people went of the thought of integration, and just as many others viewed it as a segregation. One of these that vouched for integration for a very long time but changed his tune later in life was W.E.B. Du Bois. Originally, he was for integration into white society, let black people prove their own, and it will all work out. Give it due time.
By taking the smartest and educating them.
Mm-hmm. The upper 10%, the black 10% of smart, educated, let them come forward and teach and educate and
Come back and teach us the right way to do it.
Raise the entire black community. But following years of that, he changed his tune in the 30s to one of black segregation and apart from white society.
Their own nation within a nation.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at the article 144 W.E.B. Du Bois, A Negro Nation Within a Nation, he goes into depth about why this is. There exists today a chance for the Negroes to organize a cooperative state within their own group by letting Negro farmers feed Negro artisans and Negro technicians guide Negro home industries and Negro thinkers plan this integration of cooperation while Negro artists dramatize and beautify the struggle. Economic independence can be achieved. So for that era, it boiled down from integration to we want our own.
And in so doing that, I feel that could have worked, but you got the positive that he wants the nation to be a nation, to be strong. But in the same token, to me, that's almost like, let's make our own nation so that we can be better than who they are, which we're segregating ourselves to meet them or beat them when we should all just be integrating together.
Instead of segregating yourselves and separating resources, pool all your resources and work together.
Exactly.
Yeah. But alongside that, instead of solving the problem of black racism against black people, of segregation, you're just pulling yourselves apart from it and ignoring it. But following this, to counter this, you see a change of opinion during the World War II era in the double V for victory and the four freedoms ideas that we see of that era.
Not Roosevelt's four freedoms, but the four freedoms that...
Yeah, four freedoms were applicable to Americans,
right,
and why we went into the war. But the reason this was hit so close to home for many African Americans is that for us, we weren't just fighting racism abroad in Europe and in Asia, we were fighting it at home. So,
and at first, actually, we were fighting it in our own units before we were desegregated and we could fight all together.
Mm-hmm. There was infighting due to black
versus white.
Yeah, but the African Americans in the war proved themselves very valiantly through units such as the Tuskegee Airmen and such as that. But even with this idea of fighting racism at home and abroad, there were still problems that these freedoms did not apply to this population, even if they were fighting, such as in the article African Americans and the Four Freedoms, the Negro not only wants not only to win the war, but also to win the peace. He wants the peace to be free of race and color restrictions of imperialism and exploitation, and inclusive of the participation of minorities all over the world in their own governments. When is it said that we are fighting for freedom? The Negro asks, whose freedom? It is the freedom of a peace to exploit, suppress, exclude, debase, and restrict colored peoples in India, China, Malay, and other unusual ways.
So basically, I think civil rights started out of World War II.
Definitely.
And then once we got out of the war, we noticed that, we were getting medals and we were being treated like real citizens in the army. You come out of the army and you're back into what you left.
Yeah.
And then we run into Martin Luther King in jail in Birmingham, and we have
Issues such as that. But the reason it came to such a forefront politically and governmentally was during the 50s prior to Birmingham. In the Cold War, we start to see internationally many people giving us flack for segregation despite our monikers of being the land of the free and
the brave. Right.
equal rights and such as that, when the Soviet Union were doing terrible actions and we criticized them on it.
But at home, we're doing no better.
Yeah, we're lynching black people for not even actual crimes, just minor disagreements. But this is the type of atmosphere that brings out and lets us see the civil rights come to fruition in people such as Martin Luther King. Prior to the Birmingham jail incident, what happened is civil disobedience was common, but large figureheads weren't arrested, such as Martin Luther King. Once Martin Luther King was arrested, he wrote this letter in the Birmingham jail directly pointing at those people on the sidelines watching, supporting, but not actually contributing. So, you deplore the demonstrations taking place in Birmingham, referring to the people watching. But your statement, I am sorry to say, fails to express a similar concern for the conditions that brought about the demonstrations. I am sure that none of you would want to rest content with the superficial kind of social analysis that deals merely with effects and does not grapple with the underlying causes. So,
in which there were many causes of what led Martin Luther King to be who he was and how he helped. I mean, it started with Rosa Parks, and that's when Martin Luther King really stepped into his scene. I mean, it worked all the way over from the boycott, the bus boycott of Montgomery bus boycott, straight up until Kennedy.
Yeah.
I mean, till the March on Washington. The March on Washington and the bombings of churches really got the attention of the media and the president at the time.
Public. Because when you start bombing churches and attacking innocent people, regardless of your viewpoint, not many people will support your cause if you're just attacking random people and bombing a religious establishment. Those, regardless of culture or belief, are normally considered safe havens. So bombing a church is instantly going to put a big X for many, 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 especially with how religious Americans are.
Agreed.
Yeah. So.
And then we go from the bombings to Kennedy finally, because for the first 2 years of his presidency, he really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the civil rights movement until his third term, and of course what led up to it. And he started working on a law to abolish this, and with his death and the succession of
LBJ
is where I would say that the civil rights finally came to fruition in 1964.
We saw fully implemented in law, but it's debatable whether people actually followed it.
Right, because we got the good of the civil rights and getting us to where we are today, but we also have the bad of the fact that in many laws that they did pass up to that point were very vague in their language on when implementation should be implemented. It was vague to the point of
when, as with Plessy versus Ferguson, the phrasing was in due time, not 6 months, 3 months, and as we can tell, with Plessy versus Ferguson, in due time was the 1960s.
I would say in due time was the assassination of President Kennedy, because that's when the ball really got rolling.
And past that moment, people start to really think, okay, these laws need to change, something needs to happen. And it was due to Kennedy's legacy and Kennedy finally starting that. And with the Kennedy assassination, LBJ can pick that up, even if it was a minor issue.
And run with it.
Yeah, he can take that and say, this was Kennedy's legacy, and run with it, and make it happen. After years and years of it being avoided.
And with that,
I think we're good.
we're good. Third take. It's a charm.
All right.